In a quiet residential neighborhood slightly removed from the hustle and bustle of New York, there stands an old-fashioned two-story house. Its wooden exterior, painted white, are faded in some places a testament to the years of weather it has endured. At the front door, there's a ramp installed for wheelchair access. In this house, I, Julia Brown, lived peacefully with my mother-in-law Dolly, at least until one fateful day. Don't meddle in things that don't concern you. If you can't hand over your full salary to me, then leave. The moment these shocking words left my sister-in-law Marlene's mouth, my world turned upside down. What? My voice was hoarse with astonishment. Marlene continued with a triumphant look. I am the daughter of this house, and you are just an outsider. I'll let you stay if you hand over your salary every month. If you don't like that, then leave. I was speechless at her words. For 10 years, I had devotedly cared for my mother-in-law day and night, and it was outrageous that my sister-in-law, who did nothing but play around, would say such things to me. Anger, sadness, and a deep sense of disappointment swirled within me. I vividly remember the day I married Russell and came to this house 20 years ago. I was 28 years old then. An Italian student who had recently arrived in America, Russell had kindly accepted me. With our marriage, the cohabitation with his mother, Dolly, began. Russell's father had already passed away, and living with Dolly stemmed from Russell's filial piety, as he couldn't leave his mother alone. At first, I was anxious. Living in a foreign country with a mother-in-law who spoke a different language and came from a different culture was daunting. However, Dolly seemed to sense my anxiety and always greeted me with a smile. "Julia, it must be tough getting used to life in America. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask," she would say. Dolly helped me study English and taught me about American culture and customs. Gradually, her kindness and thoughtfulness opened my heart. She patiently taught me household chores and cooking as well. Dolly explained how to make an American-style breakfast and the proper way to cook a turkey for Thanksgiving, taking me through each step with care. "Julia, your soup is really delicious. Could you teach me how to make it?" she would say. Such words from Dolly filled me with joy. We naturally built a relationship where we respected and learned from each other's cultures. Fortunately, Dolly was a very kind person, and we lived well together. Though not related by blood, she became like a real mother to me. However, everything changed 10 years ago when Dolly suddenly collapsed. One day, when I returned home from work, I found her lying on the floor in the living room. Although I nearly panicked, I managed to stay calm and immediately called an ambulance. The diagnosis at the hospital was a stroke. Thankfully, she survived, but she was left with paralysis on the right side of her body. As the doctor explained the need for long-term rehabilitation and daily assistance, my mind went blank. "Mrs. Brown, your mother-in-law will need long-term rehabilitation. She will also need help with her daily activities," the doctor said. Upon hearing the doctor's words, I nodded. At that moment, I made a firm decision. "I understand. I'll take care of her." Russell agreed with me, and I quit my job to start working from home as a freelancer so I could care for Dolly full-time. Caring for her turned out to be more challenging than I had imagined. Assisting with meals, helping with baths, and accompanying her to rehabilitation sessions every day was busy, and sometimes I was utterly exhausted. But Dolly's words of thanks and her smile healed my heart. Having lost my parents early, Dolly was like a real mother to me. That's why caregiving didn't feel like a burden, rather. I viewed it as an opportunity to give back. 3 years ago, our family faced another trial. It was a chilly, rainy day. As I was preparing breakfast like usual, the phone rang abruptly. It was the police. "Mrs. Brown, I'm sorry to inform you. Your husband has been involved in a traffic accident." The moment I heard those words, it felt as if my world had stopped. I rushed to the hospital, but the news waiting for me was the worst possible. Russell had died at the scene of the accident. The suddenness of it all made it impossible for me to accept reality. Overwhelmed by grief and despair, I couldn't stop crying for days. Dolly, too, was struck silent by the shock of losing her only son. Although her body was disabled, her mind was sharp. However, since the incident, she spent her days in a wheelchair, staring blankly out the window. I suppressed my own grief and devoted myself to caring for Dolly. I encouraged her to eat, talked to her, and did everything I could to help her regain some energy. I was determined to prevent her from deteriorating further, possibly into dementia. Dolly, it's sunny today. Would you like to go outside for some fresh air? I would suggest, and sometimes I'd take her out to the garden. We would sit on the garden bench, watching the roses that Russell had cherished, and spend quiet moments together. Occasionally we would reminisce about Russell, shedding tears together. When Russell was little, he used to play in this garden a lot. He would climb that tree and shout, "Mom, watch me." Dolly's voice trembled, but gradually light returned to her eyes. I also shared memories of my husband. Just after we got married, Russell and I spread out a picnic set in this garden, drank wine under the stars, and he told me, "Julia, I am so happy to have met you." Through these conversations, we gradually began to heal. Sharing our grief and supporting each other, we forged new bonds. For me, it was simple, nothing changed in our relationship. I would continue to live here and take care of Dolly as I had always done. But our peaceful days were about to be disrupted by a new turmoil. One day, there was an unexpected visitor. The doorbell rang, and when I opened the door, there stood Marlene. She is my late husband's sister and my sister-in-law. Long time no see, Julia. Can I stay for a bit? There was a forcefulness in Marlene's voice. I hesitated for a moment, but thought there was no reason to refuse, as she was family, so I invited her into the house. However, I had no idea that this decision would greatly change our lives. Marlene was exactly as my husband used to describe her, with a wry smile, saying, "She's much younger and has always been spoiled." Indeed, whenever she came back for New Year's or other occasions, she was very selfish and acted like a queen. Her selfishness was unbearable. Not only did she not help with caregiving, she also did none of the cooking or chores, yet ate and drank as much as she liked without cleaning up. She would get drunk, sometimes hurling insults. It was futile to expect a word of thanks from her. Her usual behavior was beyond common sense. Knowing that I was busy with caregiving, she would suddenly drop off her child and go out to have fun. When she finally came to pick up her child, she would take home the food I had prepared without asking. Even though it was her parents' home, I thought she was taking too much liberty. One day, I gathered the courage to speak up to Marlene. "Marlene, I think it would be nice if we could all cooperate and live together. Could you help out a bit?" However, her response was unexpected. "What? You, who can't even have children, are just a useless freeloader, so you should be doing all the housework to be useful? It's sad for Mom, who wanted grandchildren. That's why I bring my kids over." I was left speechless by her words. I couldn't believe that she could say such cruel things to me, knowing that I had desperately wanted children but couldn't have any. It was unbelievable that she was that gentle Dolly's daughter. I realized that it was useless to say anything to her, so I decided not to respond anymore. We didn't meet very often, and I thought it would be better if I just endured it. While I wished to live peacefully, Marlene's visits became more and more frequent. One day, Dolly asked Marlene, "Marlene, why do you leave the children here so often and come back so late at night?" Marlene replied as if making an excuse, "I started a part-time job because I need more money for the children now." "You're happy to see your grandchildren, aren't you, Mom?" "That's true, but..." Dolly seemed unconvinced. The children were still young, yet she was working at night. I also wondered why she would need to work nights when she wasn't struggling financially, but I kept silent. Then one day, as usual, Marlene suddenly visited. I thought she had come to drop off her children again, but this time she was alone. She came pulling a large travel suitcase, and just when I was wondering what was going on, she declared, "I've gotten a divorce, so I'm moving in here from today." Dolly and I were shocked and asked what she meant. Marlene, looking almost tearful, turned to Dolly and began, "Mom, the truth is, I've been suffering from domestic violence from my husband for a long time. I couldn't stand it anymore, so I decided to get a divorce." Dolly's face turned pale upon hearing these words. I was so surprised that I lost my words too. Marlene continued, "I wanted to bring the kids too, but my husband wouldn't allow it. He only agreed to the divorce on the condition that I leave the house alone." I was confused. I had met Marlene's husband a few times before, and he seemed calm and kind, not at all like someone who would commit violence. In fact, I had seen Marlene frequently yelling at her husband and children unreasonably. However, Dolly seemed to believe Marlene's words immediately. Hearing her daughter's suffering, she agreed to let her move in. "Julia, I'm sorry, but I can't abandon Marlene." Dolly apologized to me. While she said she was sorry to me, I understood that if a mother hears her daughter has been divorced and ousted, she couldn't just ignore it. With mixed feelings, I replied, "I understand." "Thank you, Mom." "Julia, please be nice, okay?" Marlene, who had appeared to be crying earlier, now smirked with dry eyes. It seemed like it was all an act. And so our life living with Marlene began. However, she continued to do nothing at all, just like before. She didn't help with her mother's care, nor did she do any cooking, laundry, or cleaning. Astonishingly, she did nothing. Moreover, her attitude towards me became increasingly arrogant. But I maintained my composure in front of Dolly. I didn't want to cause any unnecessary worry for my mother-in-law. One day, Dolly spoke to me. "Julia, there's a place I want to go. It's a bit difficult with the wheelchair, but could you come with me?" "Of course. Where would you like to go? Shall we stop by our favorite cafe? It's been a while." There was a cafe that had been our favorite since I married into the family. We used to go there often when Dolly was still healthy. "I also have something important to discuss, so that sounds good." I felt a slight unease at Dolly's words. When we arrived at the cafe, Dolly, checking around to ensure privacy, began speaking in a low voice. "Julia, I'm actually worried about something concerning Marlene." "What is it?" "She's been going out in the middle of the night and spending a lot of money. Something about her behavior seems off." A look of deep concern was evident on Dolly's face. "Also about the divorce. Something doesn't seem right. I want to contact Marlene's ex-husband, but it's difficult for me." I was surprised by my mother-in-law's words. Dolly wasn't completely convinced by Marlene's story. "I understand. I'll look into it." From that day, I quietly but steadily began to investigate the truth. Several weeks later, I had uncovered the entire truth. I contacted Marlene's ex-husband and met with him directly. His story was entirely different from Marlene's claims. Actually, Marlene had multiple affairs. I forgave her each time, trying to make things work. Sadness was evident in his eyes. In the end, Marlene left the house on her own. She neglected the children too. I was stunned. All of Marlene's stories were lies. As evidence, her ex-husband showed me exchanges of messages between Marlene and another man, along with hotel receipts. After learning everything, I told Dolly the truth. She appeared deeply hurt, yet there was also a look of resolve on her face. "Julia, thank you. There's something I must do." From that day, Dolly began closely communicating with a lawyer. She didn't share the details with me, but it seemed she was preparing something. At home, Marlene's attitude towards me became increasingly arrogant. "Hey, make something more substantial. What's with this bland, all-veggie meal? Are you trying to annoy me? I'm making these meals low in salt considering your mom's health. Marlene, you should cook what you like to eat." "What? Don't order me around, you're just a freeloader." Freeloader. Besides, my brother is dead, and you're practically a stranger now, right? Why are you still living in this house? Are you paying rent? If you have a salary, you should give it all to me." What? I was baffled by Marlene's words. It's ridiculous to keep a stranger in the house for free. You should be paying rent and utilities. Rent? I've been living here since I got married. We even paid for the renovations when we moved in, and all the utility bills. But the land and the house are ours. And now that my brother is gone, you can say whatever you want, right? Marlene's words hurt me deeply. I had devoted 10 years to caregiving for Dolly day and night, and to be treated like this was unbearable. Who will take care of Dolly if I'm not here? Don't meddle in things that don't concern you. If you can't hand over your full salary to me, then leave. The moment these shocking words left my sister-in-law Marlene's mouth, my world turned upside down. What? And you have the nerve to say such awful things while I take care of everything around the house. But Marlene just scoffed at me, as if mocking my efforts. Isn't it natural to get money from someone who's not even family staying in the house? It's ridiculous how you act as if you're doing me a favor. You must really be after the inheritance. I understand. If that's how you feel, I'll leave. I couldn't believe that Marlene, who had no intention of taking care of her own mother, was serious, so I immediately called a nursing home. And so it was decided that Dolly would move into a nursing home as I moved out. Afterward, Dolly's health seemed to decline. I visited her every day, cherishing the time I could spend with her, though we were apart. I'm so sorry, Julia. I can't believe she kicked you out. I tried to tell her to reconsider, but she wouldn't listen. Dolly, don't worry about it. Just call me if you need anything. But the end came suddenly. One day, I received a call that Dolly had a seizure due to her chronic condition. I rushed to the facility, but Marlene was nowhere to be seen. Dolly. Hang in there. I called out desperately. Dolly grasped my hand and spoke in a feeble voice. Julia. You really were. A good daughter. Dolly, don't talk like that. We still have time to spend together. Tears overflowed from my eyes. It's okay. Everything is prepared. I believe in you. With those words, Dolly quietly closed her eyes. Despite the doctor's best efforts, Dolly passed away. I regretted not being able to say a proper goodbye or express enough gratitude to her. I couldn't stop crying. A few days after Dolly's funeral, all the relatives gathered at the house where only Marlene now lived. It seemed that Dolly had requested all family members to be present when her will was disclosed. The lawyer Dolly had hired surveyed the room and began to explain. Before I read the will, at the deceased's request, she left a recorded message in her own voice. Please listen. Dolly's voice began to play, and everyone listened intently to her words. Thank you all for gathering here. I appreciate the relationships we shared during my life. I will now speak about the distribution of my estate. While it's not a vast amount, I requested your presence to avoid any trouble. First, to my daughter Marlene, I leave $100,000. Although she did not contribute at all to caring for her parents, she has young children and has gone through a divorce. I hope she uses this for the children's needs and as alimony, so I leave her only the statutory portion. Marlene gasped in astonishment. What? Statutory portion? It's not everything. Whispers spread among the relatives. Marlene is divorced? She hasn't shown her face at family gatherings for years. Alimony? Aren't the kids with her? Wasn't Julia, Russell's wife, the one who cared for Dolly all by herself? Marlene, faced with the stares of all her relatives, turned red and trembled with clenched fists. The atmosphere was charged as the family digested the revelations of Dolly's final wishes and Marlene's true character. Dolly's voice continued. Those of you hearing about Marlene's divorce for the first time might be surprised. The cause was her infidelity. It would be one thing if she were neglecting my care to focus on her family, but she was neither looking after her children nor faithful, choosing to spend her time with her lover instead. Her husband caught her and divorced her, and she lost custody of the children. I truly do not want to leave Marlene a single penny, but knowing her, she would claim her rights. To avoid any trouble for the other heirs, I will leave her only half of the statutory share. I hope she uses it to properly pay off her marital obligations, and that the remainder is used for the benefit of her children. There were gasps of surprise from the relatives, and Marlene's complexion changed. Julia, thank you for coming into our family and for all your dedication over the years. I loved everything about you. It must have been so hard for you when Russell passed away so young, yet you bravely stood by me and cared for me in our home. Tears streamed down my face. To Julia, I bequeath the same amount of $100,000, as well as our home and land. You are free to sell or rent the house, but I would be delighted if you remember the days we spent together there. Dolly, I only heard about the contents of the will just now. I calmly responded. Moreover, Dolly knew about your divorce. She heard it directly from your ex-husband. Marlene's face turned pale. I continued. Your husband repeatedly tried to mend things for the sake of the children, despite your continuous affairs. Though your kind-hearted husband had no intention of demanding alimony, Dolly suggested that he should. The relatives' glances at Marlene were filled with disdain. Finally, I said, also, it seems like you're upset about the inheritance I'm receiving, but you should know that I was legally adopted by Dolly. Legally, I am as much her child as you are. Marlene's face went ashen, and she collapsed on the spot. Applause rose from the relatives towards me. Some were tearful. It's good to see you rewarded after all your years of caring for Dolly. One said, you seemed more like her real daughter than just a daughter-in-law. Another added, if you ever need help, just call us, someone else offered. I bowed deeply. Thank you. It seems that Dolly had gathered everyone to ensure that there were no misunderstandings or unwarranted rumors about the inheritance after I received it. Afterwards, Marlene left the house cursing. Although she had to pay alimony to her ex-husband from her share of the inheritance, it seemed her life afterwards was challenging. Now I am living leisurely, sorting through the belongings in the old house. The lawyer gave me the recording of Dolly reading her will. Thank you for everything, truly. I have always loved your honesty and kindness. Just recalling Dolly's words brings tears to my eyes. I wonder if I was able to express my gratitude to her adequately. Caring for her wasn't something I thought of as caregiving. It was just natural to be together all the time. I wonder if she knew how I felt. Perhaps the contents of the will were her way of answering. If I keep crying, I worry that my husband in heaven and Dolly would be concerned about me. All right, today I'll go to that cafe for the first time in a while, I declared aloud. Arriving at the cafe, a familiar scent enveloped me, bringing back memories of the days I spent here with Dolly. Welcome, greeted a young waitress with a smile. Is it just one today? Yes, I responded, and unexpectedly, tears welled up in my eyes. Are you okay? The waitress asked, looking concerned. I'm sorry, I'm fine. I used to come here often with my mother-in-law. She has passed away now. I see. It must be a place full of memories for you and your mother-in-law, she said with a gentle smile. Yes, but it's my first time here alone. I understand. But I'm sure she's happy that you came to this special place, she reassured me. Her words made me feel a bit more encouraged. Thank you. Yes, I'm sure you're right, I said with a smile, settling into my seat. As I looked out the window from my table, the warm spring sunshine felt comforting. A new season was beginning.